Hello there, welcome to Bloomberg Sports, A View of the Diamond. I'm Rob Shaw, and today we're going to get up close and personal with Tina Cervasio, an Emmy-nominated journalist at MSG. She covers the Red Bulls as well as the Knicks. Exciting days for the Knicks right now.
It is. It was a tough end of the season. Tough way to end the season, being swept by the Celtics, and tough breaks too, with both Chauncey Billups and Amari going down with injuries. But they're heading in the right direction. It's going to be exciting going into next season.
There is a lot to talk about the Knicks. We will touch on that in a second. But let's start off with you, Tina. I mean, right now you've got what many would consider the dream job. You get to cover the Knicks. You get to talk about sports for a living. Yeah. When did you first realize that you wanted to get into sports? And for you, was it being an athlete or was it being a journalist from the very beginning in your early years?
Actually, it was a nice combination of both. I mean, I was always a sports fan as a kid. A lot of my mother's cousins or brother, my dad's cousins, they were all coaches, high school level. And in high school, I did do track and field. Tried my hand at softball. I had tennis lessons. Did the whole thing when I was a kid. Tried diving, but my strong sports were definitely gymnastics and track and field. Okay. And going back to about 10 years old, we went to the Rose Bowl as a family.
Oh, that's quite the vacation.
Yeah, and UCLA played Iowa, and my dad was just a college football fan. He wanted the family to experience the Rose Bowl because we would watch it.
Which is rare for someone from the Northeast.
Everyone says that when I tell the story, exactly. So, but we would watch it on New Year's Day, the tradition, the old days before the BCS.
Before there were 25 different bowls.
It was the bowl on New Year's Day. I love that. That's why I'm such a traditionalist. But I just was enthralled with the fans, the build up to the game, the actual game itself, being there in the stadium. We were on the 10-yard line. And my dad said, well, if you love this so much, you should start thinking about some type of a career in sports. And as I went through middle school and into high school, I did love writing, public speaking. And I thought, well, I love Barbara Walters. I love to be a journalist, to speak on the news. I love sports. And then you start seeing Linda Cohn and Hannah Storm, and you hear about Gail Gardner and all of these trailblazers. Susan Waldman's on the radio on it was 1050 when WFAN was on 1050. So I remember those days, and it started turning in my head as I was graduating college and graduating high school, looking for colleges. I want to be a sports once you got out of college and now you had to start paying bills and enter reality, how did you then get into it? I mean, for me, it was a matter of driving across the country trying to find an on-air job. Did you, number one, start with TV? Is that what the first job you were looking for? And B, what did you do? How did you get it? I was always looking for TV jobs. I sent tapes all across the country. I don't know how much money I spent sending out those tapes, the old VHS tapes.
Yeah, I did that.
And so many times, no, or a lot of times I got, because I had a very, very thick New Jersey accent at the time, to New Jersey, to New York, and, oh, would you change your name? And they just kept saying I was very Northeast, because I was sending tapes to Georgia, the Deep South, and, I'm very expressive. I am very New York, New Jersey.
You learn a lot of geography, by the way. When you're in this industry, Lafayette, Louisiana,
Yakima,
Monroe,
Washington.
There you
that's
go.
One.
Yeah, Billings, Montana.
That's my favorite.
All these places. Yeah, good times.
So I kept getting no, and I did get a job. I did finally was able to pay some bills and get a real car. Actually, at a local newspaper, and I was the sports editor for 3 weeklies. So I started writing sports, and again, I would just find unique stories, and I loved doing it. So it didn't matter to me. I was making about $150 a week, and that I wasn't on TV yet. I interviewed, I'll never forget, Tom Cruise's high school wrestling coach from Glenridge High School. Of course, his last name was Mathapur, Tom Cruise, when he was in high school, and wrote a little story about that because he had just retired from Glenridge High School. And I wrote a story on one of the guys that I went to high school with, was playing his 5th year of college football, and I would just look for unique stories. And eventually I did get a production assistant job at the old New Sport channel, which was under Sports Channel and Rainbow at the time. And I would just log games. I would go in 3 in the afternoon, get home 3 in the morning, and I was commuting about 45 miles. And this is at 21 years old, because I just wanted to be in the industry. But I learned so much about television production, about writing for TV, which was so different. And it was very hands-on, because I would write scripts for the anchors, hand it to them, and they would say, oh, do this next time, or why don't you try this? And I would get on the set or go out and do stand-ups. Eventually, I built a tape and started to get some work somewhere at small cable stations, but I never left New Jersey.
Yeah, that's lucky.
Which is amazing. But there were small cable stations. Sports News Satellite was a career-changing job. It was like a nice bridge job. I was an editor-producer, and we were producing highlights for NBC affiliates across the country. So with that, too, I would also step in as a reporter sometimes when the small towns from Alaska, an affiliate from Alaska was not going to travel to the Sweet 16, so they used me as their reporter. So I reported for them, covering the Sweet 16, and I was, again, able to build my tape. Got some random jobs. I did dog shows. Never say no. I mean, that was my big thing. Never say no. I would drive to Washington, D.C. to be a runner at a Washington Redskins game, and then the next night I'd find myself on Bloomberg Radio where I did some sports updates.
We're familiar with that.
I just never said no, whether I was on air or off air, because it was about networking, meeting people, and learning from those that were in those high-level on-air positions. And
you also couldn't say no, because in this industry, anyone would do it for free. I mean, and that's why sometimes, you know, especially at the beginning, I mean, you were mentioning the salary. It was $75 a show for me in Panama City to, actually not a show, a day. So I would do the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock for NBC, and $75. So that was, yes. Everyone wants to do it, that they're willing to do it for less. When was your first big break? I mean, you mentioned, you know, there's a little breaks to be able to get here and here and here. When did you feel you got that big break that really allowed you to, you know, step forward and really become something in this industry?
Arena football wasn't that big break. Actually, with those tapes from arena football.
Because, I mean, you're right in that it takes those small breaks to get to the big breaks. You got to put yourself in that position.
You do, and it's funny because as you're going through it, oh, this is my big break, and then you have another one that's a little bit better. Through those tapes that I made from Staten Island Cable and CN8, I was able to get a job as a fill-in anchor and reporter at CBS 2 in New York. I was doing weekend mornings as a sports anchor, so getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday when people are coming in. I was getting up at 2 a.m. Loved it, though. Again, I was talking sports on a New York City affiliate, a #1 affiliate. And I would also report frequently during the week. And that job helped me grow as an affiliate news anchor and reporter. Before I knew it, I was filling in for the sports director at the time, Chris Raggi, and doing a few evening news. So it was a great learning experience, and it got me out there in New York, in the #1 market, which was key. And also at the time, I was also doing WFAN radio, filling in. I wasn't full-time at either place, but I was working 7 days a week.
Well, you have to do it.
Exactly.
So now that you've gone there, how did you make it to Boston? And was that, as a New Jersey girl, a difficult thing to do? I mean, were you a Yankee fan growing up who now had to cover the Red Sox? How did that all go?
I was sort of a Mets fan growing up.
Good for you.
It was the '86.
Be proud of that.
Well, I know. Well, here's what happened. I did leave the Amazons. '86. That's where I really learned so much about the World Series and baseball, watching that '86 World Series. I mean, at the time too, I also loved Roger Clemens. Like, I was watching the Mets, cheering for them because that was the home team. But that was when Clemens was young, and I was learned about the history of the Red Sox by watching that series. Then when I went to college, I got swooned into the AL by the Orioles. I did my internship, got to go to Orioles games. Camden Yards was brand new.
Cal Ripken days.
Exactly. And Brady Anderson was leading off with the home runs. It was a fun time.
50 home runs that year.
So I was sort of not bandwagon. I mean, I was consistent, but I mean, just being able to sometimes cover the Yankees as a runner, or for CBS 2, or for WFAN. I mean, it was the Yankees. It was great to be at Yankee Stadium. I walked by Joe DiMaggio. I'll never forget that day. About a year before he passed, I'll never forget that day. We crossed in the elevator at Yankee Stadium. So when the Red Sox job came up, I thought, all right, well, I sort of was intrigued by them. I mean, they're part of the history why I became such a sports fan. And it was when I was working at CBS 2 in New York. And I went up there and I did my interview at Fenway Park. I mean, that just draws you in. That old ballpark and the history. And we walked out on the Green Monster. And how could that not want you to say, I want this job? And it was more difficult for my family. My husband is a big Yankees fan. There's a lot of Yankees fans in my family. And what was tough was my dad, he would, at home here, he lives in New Jersey, would be on the internet trying to read all the stuff about the Red Sox to keep up with me. And a lot of times I would get killed on message boards because I was a New Yorker.
Oh, wow.
And I had done a voiceover show on the Yes Network, too. So, she worked for the Yes Network. So it was a difficult time. Fans would get on me from being from New York. But that aside, to be able to cover a World Series, and that was a great team to cover. The personalities were unbelievable. I mean, Terry Francona was wonderful to work with as a manager, and to do interviews with David Ortiz, and I did get Manny Ramirez to talk.
Wow.
It's a whole other story now.
Yeah.
But he did talk by the time the 2007 postseason rolled along, and you saw Jonathan Papelbon come of age. I was there doing a wonderful time, covered a no-hitter of Clay Buchholz's second MLB start.
That's incredible.
And I got to meet people like Dennis Eckersley and Jim Rice, and the announcers Don and Jerry were just great to work with. They're just such Bostonians.
Then you made it back to New York with MSG, and MSG, one of the original regional sports networks in the world, really. So how did that come to be?
I was, like I said, I was looking for other jobs just to see what was out there, just in case something became available and I could get out of that baseball schedule and get back to New York. And that was my goal. I wasn't going to leave Boston for Chicago or another city like that, or D.C., which are great cities, and I would love to work there.
But for your family,
but I felt, if there's something comes up in New York, let's go after it. If not, this is such a great job. So. Obviously. But MSG came along, they answered my call, and went in for a quick meeting one time, and I was home over the holidays, and just things steamrolled from there. Now, I was originally hired to be one of the anchors on MSGNY, which was our nightly sports wrap-up show. And I was also looking to kind of get out of the field, too. I wanted to get back to anchoring, try that skill again, do more feature stories. And I was doing that with the show, and I was having a blast, but the economy took a nice little dive in 2008, and we lost our sponsor, and that show was canceled. So I'll never forget, I was on vacation, and I get a phone call. And my husband's like, oh, why are you taking 4 calls? I'm like, look, our show is canceled. Let me see what's going on. And they said, we know you have experience as a sideline reporter. We don't have a true traveling traditional sideline reporter with the Knicks. Would you be willing to go back on the road again and do these games? Yes, I'm screaming. Yes, the New York
40
Knicks.
games, by the way, compared to 80-something.
It's
not,
I know,
not
it's
quite
a big
as bad.
difference. But even traveling, I mean, it's still half the schedule. But being in New York City with MSG to cover the Knicks and be at every game as a sideline reporter, doing the post-game interviews, the pre-game interviews, I was ecstatic. So, and that's how it sort of came to be, and that was 3 seasons ago.
So how tough has it been for the first 2 seasons, and not just because they're losing, but more so because you're talking about before, you have to kind of build relationships with players.
Yes.
And you have guys, some guys out there who are very good with the media. Jamal Crawford was always one of my favorite. These guys end up getting traded.
Yes.
And for the Knicks, it truly was even a situation, I would say, and I think you could honestly say, they took a step backwards in order to take their step forwards. Look, if you have Zach Randolph and Jamal Crawford, they might have made the playoffs that year. But they decided that for the best of the future, they had to trade these players. So for you, when you establish these relationships with players, how difficult is it to see one of them go? And then we'll get to Danilo in a second.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because I know you and Danilo.
That was my example. One of the first days, I actually filled in for Al Troutwig once to host the pregame show, and that was
New York legend, by the way. Also.
I know. So that's an honor too. That's why when this job came up, and I've learned so much from him. The first game that I hosted was the day after the Crawford and Randolph trade. So it was mixed emotions because I just started getting to know Jamal, and he's so nice and such a great, gracious interview. So now we have this whole new team. But for me, being a basketball fan, I was always a big college basketball fan, and I would go to Nets games to see certain players, to see Gary Payton play, or if I heard Chris Webber, if the Kings, I know random players I know, but just from watching a lot of the games and logging those games, I would go to a lot of Nets games to see these players play. And they got Tim Thomas and Al Harrington in that trade.
Both New Jersey boys.
New Jersey guys that I watched in high school. So there was mixed emotions, but I always look for the bright side. And I guess I could transition into the trade with Gallinari. I did.
You saw him since he was a baby.
He was a baby, 19. He looked like he was 12 years old. I was there the night he was drafted, and did a great interview with him in Central Park, and his English it's so much better now. It was still very broken at the time, and we would try to figure out words in Italian. I know a little bit I know. I would try to pronounce things, and he was my first rookie player that I saw go through the system, and even through his injury, he was so good with interviews. Did a story with his dad. We had dinner together in an Italian restaurant in New York, so he's traded.
And his dad played with D'Antoni?
Yes, they were roommates too. They were very close friends. But you do get Carmelo Anthony.
This other guy.
Exactly. So I remember Stan Van Gundy was talking about it right after the trade when we were down in Orlando.
Something about Mozgov.
It was about Mozgov, but he made a great point. It's Carmelo Anthony. And Chauncey Billups, who I always was a fan of and had done great interviews with, and saw him when he was at the Garden with the USA team. And so it does pull at your heartstrings, and even Wilson Chandler, I watched him develop as a player and saw the interest the coaches took in him.
I'm banking on him coming back.
That's very possible.
We'll see.
Very possible.
Him or Crawford.
But I try to be positive and look at the bright side. Yeah. And, there was, Gallinari, and all my Italian cousins, my girl cousins were so upset, calling me up like it was my fault. But it was Carmelo Anthony.
He was my wife's favorite also. She did like this.
And a couple of my Italian uncles, too, they still can't get over it.
Yeah.
So, but again, I keep saying, but it's Carmelo Anthony, so.
Yeah, no, they'll be okay. As far as how quick the turn was, and not just the turn, but for you, someone who's there at the sideline, the excitement in the Garden was back this year. It is incredible. Basically, you couldn't give the tickets away 2 years ago, last year, and then suddenly this season came up, and you're talking hundreds of dollars just to be able to get in the building. I mean, how incredible, and were you surprised by how quick the turn was?
I have to go back, though, to the end of the 2009-10 season. Last home game, this is the old team where they cleaned house. Harrington, Duhan, Larry Hughes. I mean, can you believe that team? And it was the last game, 22 wins on the season. And the place was loud. And it just shows the devotion of the Knicks fan. And that was the end of the season. It was fans an opportunity to see their Knicks players live. And they won the game, and it was great. And it was like we were thinking, my goodness, look at this. It was their 23rd win. And the way the crowd has reacted. Now, fast forward, you go through the Amari Stoudemire signing, and this season, I mean, from day one, it was a different atmosphere because now this was the team that was being built to win. And you had a superstar free agent, and I think people attach themselves to Amari even more emotionally than maybe they would have with LeBron because they were turned away by LeBron. LeBron gave him the hand of the face. But Amari came to New York, said, I'm going to take you on my shoulders. I'm going to embrace you. I'm going to be the first free agent to say, I'm going to a place and I'm going to New York. So I think there was even more of an emotional connection when Amari took the floor that night for the home opener. Yeah,
and Amari also has it's an interesting story with him, obviously his childhood and what he went through. But in addition to that, of all these big stars, with Chris Bosh coming out, for some reason, people were looking at Amari as the other guy.
Right.
When in fact, Amari is a franchise player. Bosh is not, in my opinion, is not a franchise player.
Everybody was looking to the big three because they were all free agents.
Yeah.
And
why was he not a big three? Is the question. And the knee injury.
I was going to say that. They were going to bring up the knee injuries. But if you look back to the 09-10 season, from the All-Star break to the end of the season, when the Suns did go to the Western Conference Finals, he was the MVP that second half of the season.
Absolutely.
It was unbelievable.
Absolutely. So then to LeBron, are you surprised by the disdain? I mean, this is a guy, I was trying to explain it to my wife, and I told her, LeBron was the one guy in basketball, no matter where he went, he got cheered. As an opponent, he got cheered. And then just like that one decision, everything turned. He is now the guy who gets booed everywhere.
He had a bad summer of 2010. You would think, with the opportunity.
You think making $100 million, he'd be all right.
And to be the face of the NBA.
Yeah.
He had a bad. He was. I guess he was poorly counseled by his people, and the way he went about that decision. And it comes up again the way he did post game after beating the Celtics, after advancing, both on his national interview on TNT, the way he gave credit to the Celtics and talked about this monkey on his back, and then when he apologized, LeBron, you're a year late. If he had gone about that way, it would be totally different. But isn't it fun to sort of have a team to hate in the NBA now?
I never thought I'd root for the Celtics.
Exactly, and I'm screaming for the Bulls, like on the top of my lungs after what Jordan did to the Knicks all those years in the 90s, yelling for the Bulls, like unbelievable. So it is fun. You have the Yankees in baseball, you have Duke in college basketball. There's always that team to hate. So it's sort of fun.
It definitely is going to be the Heat. I don't think there's any question about that. So what do you see moving forward from the Knicks? I mean, obviously they need some pieces, but there's also uncertainty whether we're going to have a season this year. here. So just tell me what's going through your mind right now as far as the future of the NBA, the future of the Knicks. How important is it for this collective bargaining agreement to be reached, and how important is it for the Knicks to be able to add extra salary?
Well, I have talked to several people, and it looks almost imminent that there's going to be some type of a stoppage. I don't know if it would be a lockout. I mean, we're learning all the different terms now watching the NFL go through this. But there's going to be a long negotiation period. I know both sides are still very far apart. A couple of the players in the association have been reading, the Players Association have been reading this new CBA, and they're disappointed there's not a lot of changes. So there's still a lot of work to be done. That being said, it is so important that whatever does happen over this summer, because Summer League has already been canceled, and that's always a fun time to see.
Good time for you to go to Vegas.
It's a good time for us to go to Las Vegas, but it is fun to see the new draft picks and some of the guys coming back for their second year, like an Andy Routens would have been able to play for the Knicks in NBA Summer League and maybe grow like Tony Douglas did last year. It was a big help for him. So that's the first bad step. And it's so important for this league to get going as soon as possible, I think, because look at the NBA. It's at an all-time high, I think, since the Jordan era. And the way people are watching these NBA postseason games, they're calling it May Madness, and going to a Game 7, and the way the Bulls beat the Heat the other night. I mean, the Lakers get swept, the Celtics get eliminated, but it creates more stories, and there's more stars, and you have a Derrick Rose. It's not just LeBron and Dwayne
Memphis Grizzlies taking out San Antonio.
Yeah, exactly. And another perennial team that's there.
Our boy Zach Randolph back in action.
That's right. So it was fun to see Zach and Jamal Crawford advance through the postseason as far as they did. But I think it's important to get it going because the NBA is at an all-time high, and it would be such a hit to them if they don't get started on time.
And I did mention to you, the one good thing, though, is the last time there was a strike-shortened season, the Knickerbockers did go to the finals. Do you remember that fantastic year? I believe that was the 4-point play. I could be wrong. That might have been after, but no, I think it was.
Yeah, it
definitely was. And I guess you'd have to go back to arena football, obviously, if there's no.
True. Oh no.
So let's go full circle here. Now that you are where you are, all right. What type of advice do you give to some young journalists looking to I guess follow your path?
Don't take no for an answer. You will hear no a lot. But just make it change your path. Make it, try to do something a little different next time around, whether it's making a resume tape or an interview you do or the way you approach trying to get a job. Just try to stay positive. Keep after it. I did step away once for 3 months. I took a sales job because I just wasn't
Don't go into reality.
I know. I wasn't making a lot of money, and it was difficult.
Right.
And I wanted to buy a new car and pay my rent. And I left. I was at Staten Island Cable, quote unquote, at the time. Went to a sales job, and I'll never forget. I saw the Mets. I was working at the Hilton, actually. I saw the Mets walking in for an event, and then all the media following them and the camera crews. I said, "That's it." So I got on the phone, made some calls, and did an audition for radio, and got myself back into radio, eventually onto WFAN. So I would just say, stay positive. Keep going after it. If this is something you love, there's so many things you could do now. You can have your own website and create your own sports network on the web, through Facebook, through social media. And just keep at it if you love it. And it's there. I mean, with all of these different media outlets now, from bloggers and radio and podcasts, there are different opportunities. There's almost more, I think, than from when I first started out. You thought, okay, I have to get an affiliate job. Then the cable networks, the cable stations started building up. So that's where my opportunities came along. So I just say, stay positive, keep at it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it might not be as clear cut. I mean, but at the same time, as you alluded to, it used to be. I mean, that's what I did. I went to an affiliate. But if you think about it, like 2 or 3 affiliates per market, you only got about 600 to 1,200 jobs overall.
So small.
Now you're talking about an SNY having maybe 15, 20 people who are on air, and different places across the country who have that. Tina, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me on.
It was a blast. So Tina Cervasio, and we're going to be talking a lot more with her, actually. Pay attention to ballpark figures. We're going to find out how she is as a fantasy manager. So we've seen her as a journalist, but could she handle a fantasy team? I'll give you a hint. There are a lot of Red Sox on that team. That's all for now. I'm Rob Shaw for Review of the Diamond for Bloomberg Sports.
With a comprehensive but convenient draft kit, unique roster management tools, and an innovative trade analyzer, Bloomberg Sports Front Office 2011 remains a leader in baseball analytics.
You can get quick answers if you need them, but if you want to spend hours digging deeper, you'll be able to dig as deep as you like.
A fine gift for your friends and family who want the front office statistics and analysis at their fingertips.